Hi, good evening everyone, and welcome to today's Scrutiny Children's Services Review Group meeting. I'll just start off with a few of the housekeeping instructions. Just a reminder to all of those present that the meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. Any exempt or private items on the agenda will be taken at the end of the meeting, and the live stream will cease prior to the meeting moving into private. There might be a short delay while that happens. In-person attendees are required to wear face masks on entry into the building and meeting rooms, but may remove once seated. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. The remote participants joining the meeting using Teams, please turn your camera on and use the hands up icon to indicate a question or comment. Turn microphones on to speak and off when finished. In-person attendees, please remember to switch microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone, and turn off when finished. Would in-person attendees please also switch mobile phones off or place them on silent, and make sure you scan the NHS COVID-19 contact tracing QR poster located at the entrance of the council chamber, either before the meeting or afterwards. Before we move on to apologies, I'll just run through the attendees in present space. So my name's Councillor Lee Bridgen. I'm the chair. Present in the room today, there's councillors Keynes, Kershid, Lovell, Moles and Petts. And we have Amanda Lewis and Joe Miles, the secondary school representative, in person as well. And we also have David Collins, my apologies, thank you. David Collins. Joining remotely, we have Dr. Mohammed Al-Ramahi, who's a parent governor. I'm struggling to see the names there. Paul Senior. Can you help me? I can't see the names there.
We've got Alan Canton and Elizabeth Elliott. And we've got Paul Senior.
Alan Caton. And Alan Caton, yeah, I've mentioned Alan Caton. I think I do, yeah. Yeah, okay. So moving on to apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies?
None, Chair.
Thank you. And I haven't received any apologies either. We're quite well represented today. Moving on to item 2, which is to confirm the minutes, or whether anybody has any comments on the minutes. Any comments? No, so you'll consider those confirmed. Agreed? Thank you. Moving swiftly on to item 3, which is disclosures of interest. Have we had any disclosures? Terry, can you turn your mic? Oh, yeah. No.
It's all in it. Hello. Terry Keynes, Governor, Queen Elizabeth High School, Governor of Richmond Hill, and a Governor of the virtual school.
Thank you. And Dr. Mohammed Al-Marahi also has an interest to declare.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm a governor at Grasmere School, Warden Hill Infants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no other disclosures of interest. So we'll move on to the next item, which is item 4, urgent business.
None, Chair.
Thank you. And I've been informed of none either. So we'll move on to The next item, which is references from committees and other bodies.
Again, none, Chair.
Thank you. The next item, item 6, Chair's update. I don't have any updates to report. So we'll move on to the reports. And the next item on the agenda is item 7, which is the Youth Justice 3-year plan annual review, which is on pages 11 to 48 of your agenda and in the hands of Damien Collins. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, councillors. It's nice to see some of you in person. It's been such a long time. This is the 3rd year of this particular cycle of plan. It was due before scrutiny, I think, some way back in August, but I think your timetable has been so busy, it's been kind of put together today. Clearly, in the midst of COVID, there was no requirement from the Youth Justice Board to complete this plan last year. We completed quite a lengthy recovery plan. However, our services, both Youth Justice, Statutory Youth Justice and Targeted Youth Services, have been working since the start of the pandemic, and certainly some of these things are covered within this plan. And I thought it was really important, given this is a public document, a national public document, that work was reflected within this plan. So whereas I talk in the covering report about this being refreshed, it's pretty much just rewritten in its totality, really. There has been a huge amount of work. I think it was the best performing year that statutory youth justice has had, certainly since I've been in youth justice, and some would argue that I've been in youth justice since I was a young offender myself. And I thought it was important that was recorded, and that's what's represented within this report. Of course, underpinning that good performance in youth justice. And when I say good performance, in the last 12 months, we've only had one young person sentenced to custody. When you compare that to years 2016, 17, where there was over 60, or 2017, 2018, it's been remarkable. There's been so few young people come into the criminal justice system over the last 2 years as well. We were one of the few areas that didn't have any young people that were criminalised as a result of breaching COVID guidelines. And that was the decisions we took as a children's senior management team in having detached workers go out with police officers. All of those innovations, because let's face it, over the last 2 years, we haven't been able to work at home. We've still been managing the risk that young people present in the community, but the risk that young people present to themselves as well. But underpinning that is the huge amount of work that we've done with early intervention and prevention, which is, of course, not part of statutory youth justice as such, but it's certainly the developments we've seen across children's has reduced that youth justice cohort. And I hope that the detail of this plan certainly reflects that good work that's gone on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? So we have Councillor Keynes, then Councillor Kershid, Joe Miles, and then Councillor Miles. So Councillor Keynes first.
Right, thanks, Dave. It's as your usual way, it's a good report. Well done. I've just got a couple of queries. Just looking at the page, can't find the page. Oh, 28. And you say about youth offending population not coming to custodial. Is this because the courts have not been working for full capacity, or is it?
Not at all. Not at all. The courts, the court, that's a longer subject, but, going back to the start of this pandemic, the courts were closed March, April, May, June, July, which created a massive backlog. There was a huge amount of work done at that point to ensure that those young people were dealt with at the time. Offending hasn't stopped. What we've been really successful of here is, and I've presented to this group many times about our multi-agency gangs panel, about our amber units, some of the things we've done over the last 2 years that's reported in here. You're thinking about the TREE project, tackling, reducing, ending exploitation, and the innovations there. Working in that space has meant that we're getting young people earlier. We're getting young people and we're dealing with young people earlier. The next incarnation of that is as we move forward in a youth partnership service where we actually start working even further back to stop these young people coming into exploitation at the time. So it's not because the courts closed, that actually created a backlog. Police and courts have continued to work during that time.
Remember your
Modern technology. A breach panel. What does a breach panel do?
So a breach panel will put the parent or parents, the young person, a manager and the supervising officer of the young person in the same room together to discuss what's working, what's not working. So, you know, to look to how we can ensure compliance with that young person. A referral order breach panel is where then members of the community who are referral order panel coordinators officiate that breach panel. So if a young person is subject to a referral order, which is a statutory court order, and they're close to breaching that, and this could be non-compliance with appointments or just non-compliance with the intervention that we're proposing, we get together to discuss it.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Okay, so next, Councillor Kershid.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David, for providing a comprehensive report and working very hard during the pandemic where, you know, many services have not been open and you guys been working throughout. You know, on the page 12, you know, where you says that in achieving our priorities, we aim to reduce the number of children and young people entering the youth justice system for the first time. So what I would like to understand that how are you proposing to reduce those numbers? What measures you're going to take or what mechanism you're going to in place to reduce those numbers? So
absolutely good question. I mean, it's one of our statutory responsibilities is to reduce first-time entrants. For those that don't know, a first-time entrant is a young person that receives a caution or above. Caution, youth orders, prison. The way I view first-time entrants is stopping young people offending in the first place. So one of the, it was brave at the time because we got quite a bit of criticism for it back in 2016-17 was started working early intervention and prevention. And that was the start of our multi-agency gangs panel. And, you know, at the time, you know, almost immediately 300 referrals into that, 75% of them were not known to the police before. So, you know, we've got young people that were out there that were involved in being drawn into exploitation, young people carrying knives involved in gang associated behaviours that didn't have any intervention as part of any children's service or youth justice or anything. So essentially, you're just waiting for those young people to offend. What we did as a youth justice service, but supported by our senior management across our children's services, is we took a real direct approach to early intervention and prevention. So a number of the things that are recorded within there, particularly under the serious violence heading, because let's face it, the majority of the issues that we're facing now, certainly have for the last 7 years, is young people that are getting drawn into these criminal exploitation through, you know, drawn into gang associated behaviours. So a lot of what we develop in terms of early intervention prevention is designed to target that. Now, if you look at our current performance, which obviously isn't within this report, I think this Q2, which takes us up to November, is one of the best quarters we've ever had. Our current reoffending is 26% against the national average of 38%. But between April and November, we've had 2 young people come into the criminal justice system. Now, that's brilliant by any scale, but we know that we have a huge cohort of young people who are on that road to exploitation. Those are the developments that we are working towards because, you know, put really simply, we've shrunk the youth justice cohort and we've done that by focusing on our early intervention. My goal now is to shrink that early intervention cohort, and we do that by going back, working with these 16-year-olds that get involved in serious violence. You know, their journey into exploitation starts when they're 10. We have now got plans to develop a service that targets specialist intervention around those age. So that's how we're going to try and maintain it, but that's how we've done it pretty much.
I was looking for a little bit more narrow answer rather than a generic statement, to be honest, because I understand you're working on early intervention and prevention, but you know, how are you going to engage them so you can prevent them not to get into those traps and things? So I just want to understand that, you know, what is there to offer for them not to get into those things. So this is what I would like to understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, no, apologies. It's really difficult to give a narrow answer when you're talking about something like this because it's so kind of multifaceted. But the reality is when you look at a young person that gets involved in offending and you look at, you know, certainly the last 6 years and the offending that centres around county lines or drugs offences, so offences that I would call criminal exploitation of young people. It's multifaceted. You have a young person who perhaps whose educational ability starts to falter as they make that transition to key stage 3. So as they make that transition from primary school to secondary school, you know, they then drop out of secondary school. They don't get a full-time education. They might go to an alternative learning provision. It's there we need to target resources to those young people, not just to raise their aspirations academically, but also, you know, improve their lives in terms of their social and economical issues. So very much linked to our 2040 priorities as well. You know, we have still 1 in 4 young people living in Luton, living in poverty, which essentially means we've got tens of thousands of young people that are susceptible to being drawn in to exploitation. You know, I would argue that the multifaceted, multimodal resources from, you know, statutory resources to resources of community organisations with real life experience, working with these young people at the right time through our multi-agency gangs panel has meant we are now performing in the way we're performing now. And remember, our performance is about young people coming into the criminal justice system. So what we're doing must be working. It can't just be luck that we're seeing a steady decrease over the last 6 years. So we have to apply the same thinking to that group that we're now working with early intervention and prevention, because what circumstances have taught us, certainly in June of last year with a fatal stabbing, is you can have someone come out of nowhere and commit a really serious offence and come into the criminal justice system. So we need to focus our resources on that group there to make sure they don't come into statutory youth justice. But there's, you know, I've outlined a lot of what we've done within that report in terms of specific things, but it's not a simple answer, Councillor.
Thank you. One more thing I would like to know. I don't know whether I've missed it or whether it's part of the report, that, you know, whether the numbers have been decreased since the pandemic has begun, or they've been, you know, on the rise. So where you draw the lines?
Yeah. The numbers haven't decreased because of the pandemic. When you look at our colleagues and, you know, I mean, I sit on various Eastern Region boards with other youth offending services. I mean, in terms of diversion cases, so condition of caution cases were through the roof in terms of Essex and Hertfordshire. I think our decision to do detached patrols early on in the pandemic between the police and our youth service just reduced that. So this nationally, there is not a case that for every youth offending service, offending has reduced as a result of the pandemic. It hasn't. What became more prevalent, specifically in the earlier days of the pandemic, was the county lines phenomenon, because there were so few people on the street. You know, certain offences have gone down. You know, when, you know, we didn't have much shop theft when shops were closed, but nationally, offending is still high. You know, reoffending for our statutory neighbours are 38% against our 26. So it's not that we're performing well against a certain set of circumstances.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Joe Miles.
Thanks very much. Just an observation and a question. I noticed in the report that during school closure, the referrals to MAGPAN had reduced. And just an observation really as a head of a secondary school, it might just be worth engaging through some of the channels of secondary heads and primary heads, just to remind heads and school leaders about that, because schools have been really focused on catch-up funding, basic skills. And actually, having read the report as a head, I thought actually that's something that we should, that we should pick up again in our school and elsewhere. So just an observation really on that.
That's a really good spot, and it was a certain kind of sort of period in time where schools were closed. Put simply, the first question I'd ever ask if there was a serious incident with a young person are they known to MAGPAN? Because if the answer was yes, the system's working, a professional has referred in. And in October 2020, when we had, I think, 3 kind of fairly serious incidents together, none of them were known to MAGPAN, but there was and that was the link there.
So that was just an observation. And then the other thing, I was just interested in the report, you spoke about the disproportionality monitor and highlighted a few things and talked about alternative engagement opportunities for those groups of youngsters. Is that different to the things like Beyond the Gates project and the Tree project, or the same?
Yeah, I think it's different, and I think it's something certainly. I mean, we presented to the Behaviour Inclusion Wellbeing Advisory Board about a very kind of narrow issue in terms of alternative learning provisions with young people under 16, and how that leads to less 16 pluses going into E2E, specifically, in terms of diversity. So I think there's a number of things going on there. Beyond the Gate is a pilot that ideally I would have liked to have seen extended into a lot of schools. What it has done is it's led to a feature of our youth partnership development about some bespoke work with 10-year-olds before they make that transition to Key Stage 3, because that's a really, really key time in terms of supporting, parents and that young person at that point of transition. And that's part of our youth partnership development, which, we go to various committees to get agreement this month and then start developing. So personally, I think it's absolutely key to start targeting intensive specialist support around young people at that stage, because I don't think that schools have the ability to do that and be educators at the same time.
So we had Councillor Moles next, and then Councillor Lovell and Councillor Wahid. Terry.
Right, David. I'm very concerned because in my ward we've had lots of incidents with young people, and I'm a bit concerned that the police are no longer doing their job, mainly because they're understaffed. Does this have an effect on how you get to know about teenagers, or where do you get your initial advice from, or if somebody is looking as though they're sliding or going the wrong way?
There's a number of ways. I mean, obviously I can't comment on the police. You'd have to ask one of our police colleagues, Councillor Moles. But I think one of the greatest things that's happened over the last 2 years. So January 2020 is when we identified the emergency COVID budget and very, very quickly tapped into a lot of money to develop something called the Tree project. So I've mentioned it within there. It's called Tackling, Reducing, Ending Exploitation. And what it looked like then was groups, including the police, health workers, social workers, our workers, targeted youth workers, going out in pairs and patrolling the town 2 to 10 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 o'clock at night on certain days, engaging with young people. This was just when we I think we come out of the first lockdown and we started to see people drifting back into the town centres from the kind of sort of neighbouring parks. Because, of course, when we went into total lockdown, exploitation didn't go away. It just moved from the town centre to the parks. And through that, we started engaging with young people. That then turned into the summer project, which was beyond phenomenal. And when I say beyond phenomenal, you know, you look at Manor Road Park in South on a Wednesday evening, week after week, we were getting 50, 60 young people and some of their families down. We started working with Noah. So what you start doing is you start almost kind of providing opportunities that young people know they can engage with, or at least they know there's a professional there they can engage with if they're concerned about things. That has led to, again, scratching around and tapping into some more funding, which has led to the tree project being delivered throughout the autumn and winter months. There's an awareness session going on at Lucy tonight, which I should be at and I will be at later. You know, and our chief exec has gone to visit it tonight, which will again lead to other things that will start in spring. I think what the last 2 years has taught me is actually as much as we can put into targeted youth within our communities. I think it raises the confidence with our community members. But what it's also done, because remember, all these tree projects, they're run with community organisations. So there's, you know, tonight there will be 4 community organisations that operate in Lucy. There, you know, when we run it in Kingsway, there's locals there as well. So I think there's that community investment in it as well. So through that way we do, but also through targeted youth, but through our colleagues in schools. So as our colleague head teacher just said there, you know, we get referrals into our MAGPAN, into our AMBER through young people that are starting to kind of push boundaries, and we get involved with them. Our youth partnership service that, you know, I'm fully committed to and really excited about is going to go further into that. Hopefully.
Councillor Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question and a comment as well. And just to echo what my colleagues have said, David, that, you know, it's an absolute great report and well done, you know, for all the hard work that's been going on. I just wanted, my question is on page 11, and it's about the gender and ethnicity. Just looking at the figures there, I'm just thinking that is there a recruitment for BAME, for the BAME community, because I feel that the numbers there, you know, are quite low, you know, in senior management as well. So that was my observation, that if it's something, you know, that you would, you know, to look into. Yeah, and yeah, to commend the tree project, the awareness event is tonight, and I hope that, you know, we can join after committee. But, you know, I think that it's really commendable, and it's really a great initiative, and I'm glad to hear that it will be moving, because I thought it would just be in Lucy, but it will be going around the town. Okay, yeah, which is really good. And also beyond the gate pilot scheme, which I think is quite commendable as well, and I hope that it can be extended. Because I think that it's really, really key, as you explained. So if you could keep like committee chair to date on that as well, how it's getting on, and, you know, how we can support it as well for the future. I think it's very important. So, yeah, thank you.
I mean, you're right about the staff ethnicity. I think it's something that was picked up in Ofsted as well, and I think that next year you'll be slightly more surprised by how much progress we've made there. Yeah, beyond the gate's a brilliant idea. Hugely expensive, you know, and we all know what the finances are like in Luton, and a lot of the funding that we get for this comes from elsewhere. You know, we really scrap for the funding we've got. Having St Giles Trust involved in that one school is great. You know, to have it in all of our schools would be phenomenally expensive, but we will find a way that we have some kind of reach, because I think the most important thing about Beyond the Gate is about that interface with the services we have, and that's all part of this development of the Youth Partnership Service.
That's really good, yeah. What about the police commissioners fund? Is there any funding?
There's lots of funding. We tap into a lot of funding. I mean, the biggest set of funding, and the whole point of me getting St Giles Trust in to do this, because I got that through airport funding, but core funding was because there's such a big name. I was going to try and tap into the Youth Endowment Fund. Youth Endowment Fund is huge, but it tends to go to the big cities like Manchester and London, and you know, it's almost a joke putting in an application to it sometimes, and that's why I was hoping that getting a big name on board, we might be able to, you know, use their leverage to get. That's obviously, you know, it's been extended for another year now, because obviously the school closures really didn't give it time to get going. So that's got another year to run.
Scheme, and we hope that we get the funding to support and extend it. I think it's crucial. So thank you, but thank you as always. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wahid.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David, for a thorough and very informative report. And I just want to ask you, what provisions or interventions have you put in place for children who attend people referral units? And as many people know here, that, you know, these are the hotspots where criminals and drug dealers exploit the most vulnerable children.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, in terms of the pupil referral units, obviously we have a co-allocated worker from ACE, the Avenue Centre for Education, that's part of our service. I mean, all of our interventions, a number of what are listed within this plan, but all of our interventions are for those young people as well. In terms of dedicated resource to them, I mean, before the pandemic, we developed a fantastic programme for young boys that was delivered within the PRUs. But also we have knife crime awareness that's delivered in the PRUs. I mean, this is part of a bigger conversation, but very much linked to reducing exclusions as well, and making sure that a simple mistake that's committed by a young person doesn't mean that they're permanently excluded and going to. So we have pathways in relation to knife awareness, which could take a young person out of schools into alternative learning provisions, but then back into schools. And we're working on pathways in relation to harmful sexual behaviour as well. I mean, you know, going back to my youth partnership service, what I want to do is I want to stop young people ending up in PRUs in the first place. That's what I want. We will keep them in mainstream education, but all of our resources for those young people, but those have been specifically that we develop in line with the staff there.
Can you use your microphone, please, so that everybody can hear?
Oh, it's wonderful news that, you know, with reduction of youth offenders, which is brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keynes?
I'm going to be my usual cynical self now. There's so many groups and organisations that you're all coming together, I hope. There's so many. Are you not worried that you're treading on each other's toes? You're just going to sit back or one of them, not you, but one of them is just going to sit back and say, oh, that's their responsibility and not ours. It takes a lot of coordination, doesn't it?
Do you mean in terms of community organisations working with?
Any organisations.
I mean, I
can quote, I can quote the National Health Service is dreadful on communications, and people fall through the gaps all the while. I'm a bit concerned that with so many of your organisations and boards, that the same sort of thing could possibly happen.
I mean, you know, taking control of things. This is why the multi-agency gangs panel is the sort of jewel in the crown, because that has developed into something that, you know, I certainly didn't foresee when we developed it in 2016. You know, the multi-agency response to that, and you look at I mean, after the fatal stabbing in June, we had a lot of repercussions in the months that followed towards the victim's family, from the perpetrator's family to the perpetrator's family, lots of young people involved. And some of those really complex child strategy meetings that were held there demonstrated just how close we are now in terms of singing off the same song sheet. And one of the parallel developments that we're doing in relation to, again, I mean, it sounds like I'm advertising this Youth Partnership Service, is how we're working on our multi-agency child exploitation meetings, our contextual safeguarding tasking, which is all designed for this. But just the last point, and I'll make it really quickly, in terms of community organisations, remember, they all sit on MAGPAN. You know, this isn't, we don't have a situation anymore where an organisation gets funding and then goes around to people's team meetings touting for referrals. You know, if an organisation gets funding on the 31st of March, they get a cohort of young people from MAGPAN on the 1st of April, and they report back monthly on how they're doing. That's why that has developed into the kind of jewel of the crown. So if an organisation is not meeting the outcomes that actually we expect as funders or statutory organisations, they don't work with young people anymore.
Following on from Councillor Moles, have you ever thought of having a sort of a child line where people can ring up? Yeah, you're smiling, I know. Where people can ring up and say so and so down the road's not putting their weight, they're out with a knife each night. Have we ever thought along those lines?
I'm laughing, Councillor, because there's something we've been working on now for the last 6 months, and it's going to be launched at the end of this month. And it's again for another conversation, and it's an app called Tap Out, where young people, and it's Lutonized, you know, it's not these kind of exploitation apps that kind of our young people can't recognize. You know, it's very much Luton. You know, it's filmed in Luton, these kind of scenarios, and it's going to have the ability to get live help. So young people can approach anonymously. And we're going to set up it's going to be another one of these innovative developments that you're going to read hopefully in next year's plan.
One more and I'll shut up. Have the closure of the children's centres made any difference to your approach?
I think it's too soon to tell, given the age of the children, and so I mean I think perhaps that's something you might need to ask me in a few years' time.
Well, Councillor Pett.
Good day. It's a good report.
Thank you, Chair.
We don't expect it from you. That's
Yeah,
good.
you finished, Terry.
You're sorry.
Yes, Dave. This is by far the most positive report that we've seen from you, I think, which is really gratifying to see. Is this a result of the MASH teams working together, would you say?
This is a result of all of us working together. I mean, and I look at things really simply, the reduction in the youth justice cohorts, the statutory youth justice, the money we spend on court orders, supervising, custody, is as a result of all of us working together with the early intervention and prevention cohorts. So whether that's my colleagues in children's services, within the family partnership service, my colleagues in MASH, my colleagues in children's social care, my colleagues in police, it's all what I call the youth justice partnership. Because, you know, what you have to remember is the local authority isn't the YOS. You know, I'm the local authority representative as part of the youth justice partnership, known as the YOS. You know, we're all a youth justice partnership, so it's everyone together, but it's about that, driving that focus on early intervention and prevention, Councillor.
So the communications are pretty good at the moment. Yep.
Yes.
Good. Excellent. Well done.
I think one of the, I mean, just to put the last bit on that, you know, I sit on the same senior management team meetings as my colleagues from Children's Services and MASH. So, you know, we have a good working relationship at the moment.
Thank you. I can't see any other questions. I certainly echo the comments of Councillor Petts that you know the results of the given in this report are quite encouraging. Just a question in relation to one of the comments made in the report under challenges, risks and issues. There's a comment about the number of 16-year-old plus who are not in education, employment or training. There's concern mentioned that obviously 45% of the cohort in 2019 weren't, and there's concern that we were going to see a significant increase, possibly due down to lockdown. Do you have an update on that? Has there been a development on that?
Yeah, it's a major issue, and I alluded to it earlier. I mean, essentially, the analysis that we undertake for our strategic management board kind of identifies issues like this, and of course, you know, being the service we are, we tend to deal with a lot of young people that come into our service with kind of unmet complex needs later on, and you know, part of the analysis we've done on our statutory youth justice cohort is, you know, if a young person is in alternative learning provisions prior to 16, then they're less likely to be in post 16. That was something we presented to the Behaviour Inclusion Wellbeing Advisory Board, so it's something that's being taken forward with there. And there's also other progress as well, and I know my service director colleague Paul is in the meeting as well, and there's work going on across there in terms of part-time curriculums. Specifically in relation to the youth justice cohort, we've got something called Platform One. And you know, starting about 2.5 years ago, when the dart started really, and about these kind of big building organisations that come in to take these large projects in Luton, setting up training hubs that our young people could access, and sort of we're carrying that on. So we've got a specific thing called Platform One, where our education and employment officer is absolutely phenomenal in getting our young people that are open on our cohorts into these apprenticeships, into these positions where they can start to learn and have aspirations for the future. So there's a lot going on there, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks very much. We have a question from Paul Senior, or a comment from Paul.
Thank you, Chair. And it's not a question. I'd just like to echo the positive recognition by members in the chambers today of the work of the report and the outcomes achieved by Dave and his colleagues across the local area. Any outcomes such as this, when we compare with national best practice in terms of results and outcomes, are only achieved as a result of integrated system working across partners, across crime reduction, education, social care and health. So one of the benefits of Luton systems, it really does align with the ability to have early identification of those at risk, because people talk a lot about intervention, but unless you get the early identification of those cohorts at risk and have that integrated, joined up working at the foundational stages of concern, you don't lead to the early intervention and prevention work. So I think it's great that it's been positively recognised. The outcomes in terms of the numbers entering the criminal justice system are lower than the national average. The numbers of children and young people who are very much at risk, again, are lower. The number of children and young people who are getting excluded from our schools are reducing as well. So there's a whole range of measures that we're beginning to see the benefits of integrated system working. So I think it needs to be positive as a takeaway that Dave takes back to his teams and his partnerships, that I think it's well recognised. There's a lot of hard work going on that hasn't been achieved by luck.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Any other questions or comments? Amanda Lewis?
Thank you. I mean, I just think that the sort of curiosity and the nature of the questions, and Joe, the comment from you as well, as our members have been really, really helpful. And just to echo what Paul has said, you know, obviously the Youth Justice Board has also scrutinised the report, Dave, but it's about the whole system working together, and I think our data and the evidence has been really so positive and much to celebrate. So much more still to do. There always is, but very strong and clear message to take back to say thank you to you and the team and all of the colleagues and our schools all across the system, because it's that collective endeavour of everybody working together. So thank you.
Okay. I don't think there were any other questions or comments, so Thank you, David, for a thorough report and responses. And as I said earlier, yeah, very promising. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item in the agenda, item 8, which is the LSCB annual report for 2020 to 21, which is on pages 49 to 88 of your agenda pack. And that's in the hands of Alan Caton, is it?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it just follows on really from what Amanda was saying and Paul was saying. It's about how agencies work together, and hopefully from this report you'll see how well agencies are working together in Luton. What I want to do, because obviously it's quite a weighty report, there's lots of data in it. I don't want to go through the report as such, but I just want to give you a bit of context about where we are now as a safeguarding partnership and the changes that have taken place, because this is the first annual report of the multi-agency safeguarding arrangements which commenced in September 2019. Prior to that, of course, you will have been aware that there was a local safeguarding children board. Legislation has changed, safeguarding boards no longer exist. We've moved to multi-agency safeguarding arrangements. And I think one of the key developments there has been that is now a partnership which is led by 3 statutory partners, namely the police, the local authority and the CCG, who lead and run the multi-agency safeguarding arrangements. My role now is to be appointed as the independent scrutineer. The arrangements have to show that they have a way of providing scrutiny. So I take on that role, and part of that role is to chair meetings, which I still do, provide challenge to the statutory partners, but actually acting as a critical friend, because we all want the same thing. We all want the best outcomes for children, young people and families. I just want to give you a brief update about what the role of the multi-agency safeguarding arrangements are, and quite clearly what they're there to do. And it follows on from what Dave was saying and Amanda was saying. It's about supporting and enabling local organisations and agencies to work together in a system where children are safeguarded and their welfare is promoted, that partner organisations and agencies collaborate, they share, they co-own the vision for how to achieve improved outcomes for vulnerable children, that organisations and agencies challenge appropriately and hold one another to account effectively, and that's really important within the safeguarding arena. That there's, and this goes back to what Dave was saying, and it follows on there about early identification and analysis of new safeguarding issues and emerging threats, that learning is promoted and embedded in a way that local services for children and families can become more reflective and implement changes to practice. And perhaps I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And that information is shared effectively to facilitate more accurate and timely decision making for children and families. And I mentioned some of those key things because they still keep coming up as issues. And I guess part of my job as the scrutineer and the chair is to challenge agencies to ensure they're doing the best they can, and we are collectively the best we can be to safeguard and promote the welfare of all of our vulnerable children and families. So the report you've got in front of you is a report by the safeguarding partners which outlines all the activity, and I'm sure you'll agree when you see that report there has been a lot of activity involving a lot of partners across Luton to work together to safeguard and promote the welfare of children and young people. My job, and you'll see my introductory part as the scrutineer at the beginning of the report, just highlights where I think we are with these arrangements. And like I said right at the beginning, this is very new. It's new to all the partners, the way that they're now being structured and the way that the partnership is being governed. But obviously part of my role is to look at what goes well, you know, where we can perhaps need to see some more improvement, and just a couple of areas. I mean, you know, certainly this has been a hugely challenging year for all of the partnerships working in in COVID. There's been extreme challenges, particularly for vulnerable children. And I've been really impressed with the way the partnership in Luton has come together to identify those vulnerable children and see them where they can in really difficult circumstances and work to ensure that they remain safeguarded and protected from harm. So that's a real key bonus. And I have to say, you know, a lot of thanks goes out to the schools, because I think the schools did a fantastic job, if you'll remember, right at the heart of lockdown, when schools weren't necessarily going to be open, to keep the most vulnerable children safe. And I really do recognise that. I guess the other things that we do as a safeguarding partnership, and Dave again alluded to the very sad stabbing, that's one of a number of incidents that come to the partnership to look at reviewing our practice to ensure that we can learn from anything that we could do better under the circumstances, the way we work together as a partnership. We've undertaken a number of those reviews, and you'll see details of that in the report. And again, my job is to hold agencies to account to ensure that the recommendations that flow from those reviews and any actions are implemented, that frontline practice is enhanced and changed as a result, and to articulate that there have been improved outcomes for children following those reviews. So there's a lot of that going on. We need to make sure we engage with the wider partnership. And I know one of the councillors was asking the question, how do you coordinate and manage all of that? And I think we want to look at engaging all partners. There are a number of relevant agencies across Luton that work with the statutory partners to deliver effective safeguarding. Where I think we can be better, I'm not saying it's bad, but where I think we can be better is our engagement with schools. I think as a partnership, we need to make sure that schools understand the role of the partners, and the partners can have that good linking in with all of the schools. We get representation from schools, but it's how do we work with all schools across Luton? There is a large number, and we're doing some work with some funding from the DFE to look at improving our engagement with schools, and a lot of that came out also from the Me Too, or Everyone's Invited campaign, which kind of looked at the issues of sexism and rape culture within schools, and actually how can we improve our links between schools and the safeguarding partnership. So we are doing some work around that. So I don't kind of want to spend a lot of time talking, because I think partners might want to ask some questions, but overarchingly, what I do see in Luton is a clear and focused partnership. I see joint and equal responsibility between those three statutory partners in leading the partnership. And I do genuinely see a partnership that wants to work together, that is mature, that is prepared to have those mature and challenging conversations, and that is desperately trying to seek out our most vulnerable children and provide help and support at the earliest opportunity. And we just need to continue in that vein. Of course, there's always more we can do, and there is, and the board is working very hard, and the partners are working hard to drive forward improvements in practice and continue to improve outcomes for children and young people. So effectively, I just wanted to sort of give that overview. Like I say, this is a new report, a new stage. My role is now changed from being the chair who writes the report. It's now the statutory partners, and I have a different role in overseeing and scrutinising and working very closely with the three statutory partners. And I know Amanda is here today and may wish to contribute at some point as we go through, if there's any further questions. So hopefully that gives you an overview, Chair, and but if you want any more detail, please let me know, or any questions.
Thanks very much. So we have Councillor Keynes.
Thank you very much. It's an interesting report, I think. You say the schools are involved. Are the academies taking their role seriously?
Well, the work we are doing is to ensure all schools and the whole wider education settings are involved in safeguarding. Clearly, they are involved. Each school has to have a designated safeguarding lead. There is regular conversations, and I'm sure Amanda would tell you that there is regular conversations between head teachers and Amanda's service. But I think from a wider partnership issue, we want to make sure that there is that two-way flow of dialogue, that all schools can work with the safeguarding partners. And like I say, I'm hoping that work is now ongoing. We've got some support from the DFE and some funding. Some head teachers are leading that work. And so hopefully this time next year, I'll be able to give you a better update. But you're right, it's absolutely all schools should be part of the safeguarding process. And they are, but I just think there's a way in which we can improve as a partnership with our engagement with schools and vice versa.
Right, thank you. Can I page 63 of the report, health and well-being, 26% of 10 to 11-year-olds in Luton are obese. How do you know this with the children's centres closing? Because they always came up with the figure.
I guess colleagues in public health have that figure, and we go by the figures and the data that is produced, because obviously we need.
I missed that. Who comes up with the figure?
I guess it would be colleagues in public health. I mean, we just get a data. Sally's got a hand up and wants to come in. I'm sure Sally will be able to answer that for you better than me.
Yeah, thank you. It's part of the National Childhood Measurement Programme, so it's measured in schools. So there's a national programme that does a measurement in reception and year 6. And that's how we get our childhood obesity data. And it was paused in the first year of COVID, and then a 10% sample was taken last year, and it's getting built back up again now.
That brings me back to my original question. Were the academies involved?
Is that to me, Councillor, or to Sally in relation to the obesity question?
Anybody who wants to answer would be nice.
But specifically in relation to the obesity issue or the wider safeguarding?
Just asking, the obesity figures came from the schools. Was that all schools? Or are the academies not taking part?
As far as I'm aware, the National Childhood Measurement Programme is all primary schools.
Yeah, I'm not getting the answer, am I?
Councillor Keynes, that would include academies where we have got that would include the academies that are primary schools as well. Yeah. And Joe, as a head teacher of an academy, would also like to make a comment, Chair, if there's a thank you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, nice.
As the head teacher of a secondary school, which is in a multi-academy trust, all the safeguarding arrangements are statutory, and therefore whether you're an academy or a local authority school, all of those arrangements apply. So when we're talking about looking at the report, then it encompasses academy schools as well as any other designation of schools.
That's interesting. That's good. Lovely. Well done. Yeah, thank you. My only other question is to Mr. Caton. All these groups under one umbrella, the same questions I asked Dave Collins. What guarantee have we got that they're all not going to be working against each other? Is there some way of making sure nobody falls through the trap?
I mean, there's a lot of echo comes back when we started. Yeah, I think that the fact that we have a structure in our partnership arrangements, and of course Amanda may wish to come in on this, but I think we have a good structure of meetings. We have clear buy-in and attendance by very senior managers across a range of agencies, particularly police, health and the CCG. I think that we provide a space within those meetings and our executive meetings for there to be open, transparent and honest discussions where we feel practice is not working. And those discussions are had on occasions. But in general terms, I mean, I think we are definitely all signed up to a ethos and a culture of wanting to identify our most vulnerable children, to provide them help at the earliest opportunity. And we ensure that the frontline staff are delivering against the learning within the safeguarding partnership. So of course it's a challenge when you've got lots of different agencies and each agency has its own culture. And I think, you know, some of the work that we do further down the line about, you know, multi-agency training. So when we're training our frontline staff in safeguarding issues, we want to try and get police officers and social workers and nurses and teachers all sitting around that classroom. So there is an opportunity for them to understand the pressures within their own organisations. But that is an ethos that we want to promote. And in general, I think there is good buy-in to the the vision of effective safeguarding across Luton. I don't know, Amanda, whether there's anything you wanted to add there from a sort of statutory partners perspective.
Thanks, Alan. I think you gave a really full response. I'm very clear about everyone's strong and determined commitment, and about us working collectively across the whole system, and about building those trusted relationships, which means that at times we are having uncomfortable and difficult conversations, but we've got the depth of those relationships, which means that we can, where we may have professional differences, because at times we will have professional differences, but we are committed to one outcome, which is about safeguarding those children who are most vulnerable across Luton. Thanks. I can see, Chair, that Paul had his hand up for a little while.
Yes, yeah, I was called Paul in now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And it's just following on from the comments regarding the engagement and the input of our academy schools. One of our head teacher colleagues has already made clear the engagement is there. And part of the ethos and the culture of the Luton family of schools really working together effectively means that there isn't a reliance on the use of the Section 11 statutory duty to collaborate as a local authority, or even the use of the Section 175 statutory duty, which is the annual safeguarding audits as well. There's lots of great collaboration in place. We have Luton education leaders, we have our DSLs in schools, so our designated safeguarding leads, our SENCOs. There's lots of mechanisms, lots of partnerships in place. We look at it as family of schools, are engaging with our systems and processes effectively to collaborate, share practice, share learning, and optimise opportunities to minimise the potential for risk. So, dare I say it, doing what I do as an interim director, visiting other local areas up and down the country, I've come to Luton, and my view would be that in terms of whereas some areas may be reliant on the statutory duties to bring things together, in Luton there isn't a need to, at this moment in time, from what I've seen, impose or deploy those statutory duties that I've referred to, because the culture, the ethos lends to effective partnership, working and collaboration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Alan, and to your team for the report. I just wanted to speak on page 72, managing and working within a context of faith and culture and ethnicity. And just wanted to point out the key finding, the need for all organisations to consider how they enable practitioners to be curious and to consider how ethnicity, culture, faith and experiences of racism impact on the child and their family. And it goes on to say that there's a clear challenge for all organisations working in Luton to ensure staff are confident in being able to understand the implications that culture, faith and migration have for a family and the impact it may have on the children. Further down, it talks about the PAN-BETS level, our consideration is being given to whether an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy is needed to overlay the work, and which I think that is, it's interesting, and I wanted to know, what the next steps will be on that, and would we be updated, when this consideration is given, because I think that it's an important factor here, the equality, diversity, as well as the faith and culture bit, impact on the children. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I absolutely agree. I mean, it's a really crucial issue, and particularly in Luton, and this has come up, as you've probably seen, from a number of our serious case reviews, where that there is a lack of confidence in the workforce to understand the implications that culture, faith, race, and migration have for a family, and there's something around, we recognise that we needed further training and further work to be done with the workforce to improve on that. And so that work is underway. I think there has been certainly lots of improved immediate activity taken around diversity training, and I know that that's been taken and underway. There's now further audits planned to look at cases to ensure that, okay, we deliver that training, so what difference is it making? So as we go forward now, there's some audits planned, and we're trying to work on getting some data so that we can further understand that, and that's a challenge, getting data to understand that field. But there is a group that looks at the data that's coming in. So I think that work is ongoing. It stems from recent case reviews that have been published. I think all partners recognise that there is work needs to be done to improve our response, particularly around faith, ethnicity and culture and diversity. And I think that's a good sign in itself, that partners recognise that, and we collectively want to work to improve those outcomes. So I think as that progresses, it will be something perhaps that I will mention in next year's report. Which is actually, we're thinking about pulling together now, because if we're coming to, by the time we get to the end of March, we're going to be looking at next year's report. And I think that's a big piece of work for me to look at the impact from that learning that has had on the workforce. So that's something I will be able to come back on once we've concluded that piece of work.
Thanks, Alan. Just wanted to quickly say as well that trying to get there were concerns around quality of data and therefore the ability to draw any clear conclusions. So, would that be looked at as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's part of, obviously the way we work, we have to kind of have data to understand where we're at. And whilst we get a load of data from the local authority, because this is a multi-agency partnership, I'm working hard with colleagues in health and in policing and in probation and in youth offending to get the wider picture and understand the whole partnership data. And we'll feed that culture and ethnicity data into the process, which is monitored on a regular basis. So that's again ongoing work to ensure we get to data, so we can get behind that data and really understand the impact of what we're doing. And that's the plan. There's a challenge there. I mean, it's going to be difficult, but I think we need to do that. And again, I can update you on that once that work is concluded.
Councillor Waheed.
Yeah. Thanks, Alan. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the next report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alan, for a comprehensive report, Alan and the team. I just want to know, the Pan Bedfordshire Strategic Leadership Group, who's the chair and when do you meet and where do you meet? When's the meetings? So does it rotate in Bedfordshire? Because
again, this echoing. Can I pass that? Because I think that's shared between the directors of children's services across Bedfordshire. I don't know, Amanda, whether you'd be better placed to update on that one.
Thanks, Alan. It has changed between the three DCSs. So either the DCS of Central Beds, she held that position for a while. I have chaired the meeting on a number of occasions, and we've agreed at the current time that the DCS for Beds Borough will pick that up in the next meeting. We were meeting on a bi-monthly basis, but we have moved that now to a quarterly basis. So I think all of the partners around the table working on that Bedfordshire footprint, particularly from the police and the CCG's perspective and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioners, the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner have all found that valuable. So we will continue to do that. And we have our independent scrutineers and our directors of public health on that meeting as well.
Councillor Kershid.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Alan, for your for the report, and I would like to. I'm actually quite grateful to all of the partners who are involved in the work for the child's safeguarding. What I would like to understand on the page 65, on the second paragraph, it says the majority of children referred to multi-agency safeguarding hub MASH continue to be in the age group 10 to 15. The LS CB is therefore considering whether there is a gap in service that prevents these children being identified earlier. So what I would like to understand that, you know, what sort of work you have done to identify the gap, whether you have, you know, started working on that, or whether it's a plan that this is what you're going to do in the near future.
I'm just trying to find the page there. The was it 65? Did you say? Just to look at that in context.
It's the second paragraph.
Oh, I lost it for a second. In with the bar, because I'm not actually looking at the report, so I haven't got the same page numbers. But it's somewhere where there's some bar charts and graphs, isn't it? But sorry, it's about the numbers of referrals you're saying going between 0 to 15, and it's about the opportunity to identify those earlier. Is that what we were saying in the report?
The key facts that you have identified, you're considering that there are gaps which are preventing these children to be identified earlier.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I've got it there. So I mean, I think it's a question that has come up. I think that's in the future work plans for us to look at that. So if the majority of children, we need to try and understand, and a lot of our work is about questioning and trying to understand the reason why things may be happening. I mean, I think we get a lot of referrals in, and it's, you know, whilst of course it's always disappointing when people refer in, but when we've been pushing, for example, for referrals to come in where there have been instances of domestic abuse and where children are present, because even though perhaps there was the children weren't even living there at the time, but if children are ordinarily resident where that takes place, then we need the referrals to come in. Now, they've been increasing year on year, those referrals, particularly from police colleagues, which is probably a good thing from our perspective to try and identify those children. But actually, we need to kind of understand the impact of what it means for those children when those referrals come in. So, I mean, I just use domestic abuse as a one-off because those numbers of referrals continue to increase, and particularly because children may be present or ordinarily resident where that domestic abuse takes place. So, you know, is there a service provision for those children that should be provided? I'm not sure I fully understand that. And again, Amanda might be better placed as one of the statutory partners and children's services lead to talk more detail about the services that are being provided and where we think we need to sort of understand more and whether there is a gap in that service provision that would help to effectively safeguard and protect young children at an earlier stage. Sorry, Amanda, if I put you on the spot again, but you might be better placed to answer that one.
Well, I'm happy to, but I also think that Sally may want to give a view because, you know, through the public health grant, you know, the commissioning of domestic abuse services, not just through the public health grant, but more generally, the commissioning of domestic abuse services is under Sally's umbrella. And I think, Sally, one of the things that we both want to say is that one of the areas that was missing and was a significant concern for us both and for our communities was the lack of a perpetrator program. So those children living within families where the direct work with the perpetrator what was a gap, and that's just been addressed now through the Bridge project. So that would be an example of what do we know that we need, and what do we want to put in place. And we're just in the process of jointly completing a joint strategic needs assessment that will be considered in detail at the domestic abuse forum, the domestic abuse board, which each local authority area has. So that, again, that joint multi-agency work is really important. But Sally's team have been leading on that joint strategic needs assessment. So Sally, I don't know if there's anything that you'd want to add on that.
No, I think that covers it. So I think,
yeah, as we build that strategy and actions following the needs assessment, the work programme for that will become much clearer, and the interlinks between a lot of the related areas like drug and alcohol services, mental health, I think is really important in all of that area as well.
Thanks, Sally.
It means that you're going to add this in your future report, as you know, the work you have done, or
yeah, I think if there are,
does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And if there are issues mentioned in this report around things we say as a partnership we're going to do, I would certainly expect to see that updated so that you can see next year we can continually see we're identifying issues, we're identifying where gaps are, we're working on that, and come back and tell you hopefully what we've done about it, or if we haven't done anything about it, why we haven't done anything about it. So it's important for me as the scrutineer to, I think, ensure that that work is concluded and that it's reflected in next year's report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the floor? Okay, nothing on the screen. Just one question for me. I just noticed in appendix, in relation to one of the surveys, I think it's the satisfaction survey. There does seem to be a bit of a trend, an increasing trend, certainly in the year 10s, in students saying that they're not at all satisfied with their life, certainly from 2016 onwards. So obviously that's pre-COVID lockdown. I was just wondering whether there's been sort of any trend or cause identified behind this trend in this increasing trend in, I guess, dissatisfaction.
I think that might come. I don't know who's going to talk about it in the shoe survey, but certainly Tara's put her hand up. I'm sure, Tara, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I guess you'll be talking quite a bit about that when you talk about the shoe survey. So it may be, I mean, because yes, absolutely. I mean, and I think Sally mentioned it earlier, mental health and young people's mental health is a real concern to me, and some of the stuff I read from these surveys about, you know, they don't feel they can trust anybody, and the increase in mental health is a real concern across the partnership. You know, we've even seen, sadly, young people taking their own lives, which is an absolute tragedy, and we want to try and learn from those within our review process as well. But I think the work that Tara and the team have been doing, again, it's a whole partnership approach, you know, so that there's work being done to engage with children and young people, to understand what affects them mentally. And I think then there's challenges for the partnership, either individual agencies or collectively, to put in place strategies to sort of minimise those harms. But I'm sure that Tara will explain on that a little bit more. But as a board, we do get updates from Tara, and we do understand that work goes on, and we do desperately want to understand the impact that's having. And I think COVID and lockdowns have made that more challenging for our young people, and certainly something that we all want to work towards, improving their life chances and their outcomes. So, I mean, not an exact answer, because I don't think there is one necessarily, but I think, you know, there is a commitment by all agencies that recognise that issue and want to work together to improve those outcomes.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll cover that on the next item as well. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the floor? I think that covers it. Thank you. So the recommendation is that the committee note the findings of the report. All those in favour? Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Great. So moving swiftly on to the next item of the agenda, which is item 9, which is the shoe survey key findings, which is in the hands of Tara Lewis. Thank you.
Chair, can I come in just before Tara starts there, if that's okay?
Oh, my apologies, Paul. I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
No worries. Thank you, Chair. And really, just to introduce this piece of work, I know that colleagues in the chamber will have read the report already. So I have asked Tara to come along in a role as the lead for our school health education unit work. And this survey has been undertaken in recent years. It's undertaken across the country, so it's not a Luton specific survey, but the findings are relevant to Luton schools. So Tara will be able to share some high level findings and key messages from the report, so colleagues will have seen it. So and then following which we can maybe take some questions. But there's a real theme here. It follows on from Alan's previous paper, which follows on from Dave's paper as well. So how we as a local area system with partners are working with local children, young people and families and with our schools to obviously really drive the best possible outcomes for our local children and young people. But this survey is important because there's a lot of rich data in there. There's a lot of rich findings in there. So as I say, Tara, if you can just give a high-level overview, if you can introduce yourself first of all, Tara, because I'm mindful that maybe not everybody knows you in this work, but you've done a lot of work in this space with head teachers and system leaders and partners recently. So, Tara, thank you so much for progressing that and coming along this evening to allow our members to get a deeper understanding of the work of the SHU survey. So, Tara, if you can introduce yourself and just give that overview, please.
Right, so hi, I'm Tara Lewis. I'm the School Health Education Specialist and I sit within public health and within education. So I take the public health agenda to schools and I take the schools' request for support to public health. So it's kind of, I'm the bridge between the two services. Now, as Paul said, we do this survey every year. It's public health funded. We don't reach every school, so schools can decide whether they do the survey or not. They get results which are confidential to them, but we, as a public health education team, we have an overview of the Luton averages. So this year we've been able to do a five-year analysis, which we can also compare to the survey that we do annually. So we do have the results from the SHU 2021, and you can see from the report there's a huge scope within this health-related behaviours survey, but within the 5-year trend, not every area is covered purely because the survey has evolved as other services have jumped on board because they found the value in the data and have getting questions for their services, and so questions have been removed, amended, adapted. So in the trend, what I've done is put some key findings, and I think the biggest key finding is the increase year on year of secondary school students that have no trusted adult, and that's probably the biggest and most significant finding in the whole survey, because that is across the board for any professional who works with young people, because we know that a trusted adult is one of the key mitigating factors against the effect of the childhood experience. So a trusted adult taking part in sport or having naturally high resilience. So we have seen that increase year on year. Now somebody mentioned regarding life satisfaction and emotional well-being. So what we're seeing is, although we're seeing a decrease in boys, mainstream boys, who worry a lot about issues, we've still got significantly high levels of emotional health and mental well-being levels within our young people. So lots of worry about one or more topics. We've got a higher level of worry within the girls than the boys. And when we further differentiate to young people who self-identify as SEND, we see higher levels still around emotional health, mental well-being, anxiety, self-esteem. We also see that our SEND young people are scoring higher in the low self-esteem bracket. And although nationally girls always score higher in the low self-esteem bracket than boys, we're seeing within our SEND young people, girls are significantly higher in that category. When we look at health risk behaviours, we have got a win where we do see that secondary school students, despite thinking that it's more dangerous to go out at nights within Luton, we're seeing less secondary school students saying that they carry knives or they know people that carry knives. Now that refers to our mainstream young people, because we don't see the same picture when we ask our SEND young people. So within the SEND group, we're seeing higher levels of antisocial behaviour, higher levels of knife crime, higher levels of perpetrating or being a victim of crime. We're also seeing a decrease in the proportion of students reporting they're a drug user. However, we do not see that within the girls. And I think when we're looking at risks and looking at trends and comparing and putting it in the context of how the children are responding, we're seeing significant risks among our girls. And when we then differentiate that down further, we're seeing significant risk within our SEND girls. We have seen a decrease in students that think that condoms are reliable and having confidence to go to a sexual health clinic, which is obviously important for us when we're looking at teenage pregnancy, when we're looking at increases in STIs. I think even though that is a 5-year trend, we were quite successful in taking services into schools prior to COVID, and all that work at the moment has stopped because of schools are managing COVID. They don't want lots of practitioners in schools at once. So I think that has had a knock-on effect. We're also, when we look at SEND girls, we're also seeing that they seem to have more knowledge around sexual health issues, and there's more risky behaviours that they're participating in. So overall, when we're looking at the 5-year trend, we're still seeing very high levels of emotional health and well-being issues, particularly high in girls, higher if we then differentiate that to SEND girls. And when we're looking at SEND versus children that don't identify as SEND, and these children, we do not know if they have a diagnosis because we ask them to self-identify as SEND, and we're seeing lots of higher risky behaviours within that group. So that kind of is the SHU findings, a 5-year trend in a nutshell. But obviously you have the report which goes into a lot more detail. Now, in terms of what we have been doing, so because relationships and sex and health education has become statutory in secondary, and relationships and health is statutory in primary, there's been a lot of work going into upskilling teachers around prevention, because that curriculum includes mental health, it includes substance misuse, also relationships. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into schools, and all our schools have had access to free training that we've commissioned. We have done a lot of work around trauma informed, so the ACEs, and all our schools have had access to trauma informed online training and other training such as the COVID response and toxic stress. So there's been a huge input. We've currently got funding for mental health training for professionals who work with young people. That is going to be Luton accredited, and it will be bespoke to Luton, so that we will be modelling it on Mental Health First Aid England, but it'll be more inclusive of looking at cultural attitudes towards mental health, including autism, ADHD, which is missing really from the national programme. So that's something that we're currently working on. And we've also created a mental health professionals network meeting, which is for schools and all services that work with young people, so that we can have that collaborative approach. We can have the sharing of good practice, understanding what the needs are, and making sure that offer is really out there to everybody, because sometimes messages get lost, and the person responsible for delivering the message service may leave, and so it's making sure that all services that work with young people know what our offer is. So that's, we got that in, we've set that up. We've also developed a substance misuse practitioners training, accredited training and partnership with Resolutions, and a relationships and health practitioners accredited training, and that's a collaboration with Resolutions, ourselves, Luton Sexual Health Services, Luton All Women's Services, CHUMS. So there's lots of training offers that we are in the process of developing. I think one of the key messages is the signposting. As we no longer can go into schools at this time, it's really important that young people constantly signposted. Services, schools know what services are available. Services keep sending those messages of their updated offer to schools, and it's very visually aware, because we know that young people, I think they have to see something 7 times before they even think about texting or calling. So it's those messages have to be very clear, and that all services that support young people are very clear about the findings and look at their provision and how they can support those findings. We're talking to resolutions and meeting with Luton Sexual Health Services. They've now agreed to collect SEND data, and they haven't done that previously. So, but they've agreed to collect that so they can see when they've got their service users, what proportion of young people would be identifying SEND, because SEND is where we do have real concerns, and we know there's lots of vulnerabilities, but this is the first time that we've been able to evidence that there's significant differences between young people who identify SEND to those that do not. I think that's kind of a whirlwind tour. Any questions?
Thanks, Tara. So we'll go to Councillor Moles first. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. I'm a little bit sceptical about the statistics, etc. When you asked these questions, did it come out in a form or were questions asked?
Right, so it's done online within school. That's why 1 year we couldn't do it as the children were in lockdown, and it has to be done in school because of the nature of the questions. And we don't design the questions ourselves. We use a company, SHU, this School Health Education Unit, which has been established for 25 years. It's used by lots of different public health departments, lots of different local authorities, and they will frame the questions to get the best results and make them age appropriate. So so we have questions for year 5 and 6, we have questions for year 8, we have additional questions for year 10 and 11, but we do not create those questions, and it's done in an environment for the young people to get the best response.
Looking at it from a teenager a teenager watching the television and looking through the statistics, I just wonder how much of this information, I know they're sexually educated in schools, but how much of these results have actually come from the media? Because I find them quite shocking, actually. I may be old-fashioned, but I do find them quite shocking. Is that a general feeling, or is this society as it is today?
I think they have to be put in context. If you look at just look at the results on their own, some results can appear really shocking, but when you look at the national picture, there's nothing in our results that is an outlier within the national picture of young people. And we do have our young people are overly influenced around social media that impacts their emotional well-being, their mental health, their self-esteem, their behaviours. So social media and social platforms have a huge effect on our young people, and it's not they don't have the same grown-up experience that we had, and lots of evidence from Young Minds and Bernardo's, etc., NSPCC will say that young people now, social media and platforms is actually part of their growing up and their development. That is the big impact that it has. And so I think that we have to put it in the context of the national picture and what is happening with our young people today. And it is concerning, but it's not concerning to Luton alone.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we go to Councillor Waheed and then Councillor Moles. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Tara. My question to you is, you mentioned in the report, page 93, that a total of 13 schools took part in the survey in 2021. So that includes academies and every?
Yes, so the offer is out to all schools, and academies do take part in that process. We have a new school that hasn't taken part as yet, but the offer is open to every school.
Schools, isn't it, we're talking? Okay. Can't be primary schools, but because it said the ages and everything. Right. So how many schools have we got? Is that all? Is it 100% of the schools took place?
No,
No, that's what I need to know. What percentage took place and why didn't all of them take place?
I think lots of schools don't take part because this year we had COVID, and it takes a significant amount of time, and so they will have to get all their children, it's a whole year group or 2 year groups, take them off timetable, have the computer space for them to do it, and so for some schools that is really time consuming. They may not have the staff at the time, and also some schools will do it and then they'll leave it for a couple of years because they want to work on their results. It would be fantastic if every school did the survey every year, but for different reasons, different schools will dip in and dip out. We do have two schools, Stopsley High School and Wigmore Juniors, that have actually participated in all the surveys. So it's a varying degree. I think the only school that secondary school, apart from the new school, that hasn't ever done a survey would be Chiltern, would be Chalk Hills. Every other secondary school has done the survey.
They have not, it's the reason that you've given that's why they don't participate in the survey.
It's for different reasons.
Okay. Is there any trends or data about teenage pregnancies in the since 2015?
We do have teenage pregnancy, but we do not collect that through the survey.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Before I call Councillor Lovell in, I think Paul Senior might have a comment, and also Sally, but I'll go to Paul first. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And it just follows on from the line of questioning that Tara's just received. And I think Tara delivered the key messages, but we have to remember that obviously during the recent times, the primary focus for our schools has been remaining open and dealing with the pandemic. And none of our schools have had the capability and capacity to, amongst various competing priorities, to be able to do this as well. As Tara said, it's quite a resource intensive challenge as well. And for schools to have the infrastructure to deal with it has been a challenge. So it's not a mandatory process. We obviously want as much data as possible. And the more data we have, the better questions we can ask. But it is a national survey, and I'm not aware of any local area nationally out of 151 local areas where all schools have engaged with the process. So we've got a sample. We've got a sample which gives us good data to allow to ask for better questions. But fundamentally, during the pandemic process, and since I've been Service Director of Education in Luton, each and every one of our schools and settings has actually remained open, despite the challenges presented by COVID and the pandemic. And that's through good partnership working between education and our public health colleagues, with the support of children's social care and our partners in schools and settings, great risk assessments, great processes in place. And even up until yesterday, when I attended the Regional Education Directors Forum, where Luton's attendance, our school attendance, is above national average for all children and young people. Our school attendance for children and young people open to social care is above national average. Our pupil attendance for children with an education, health and care plan is, again, above national average. Going off point here slightly, but the point I'm trying to make is that our schools and settings are working incredibly hard during challenging times to keep our schools and settings open. This survey is important, but again, during the pandemic, obviously we have to be discretionary with the challenges we put on our schools and what we want from them as well. So is real partnership working? But I think 13 schools gives us a good sample, as is captured in the report that Tara set out today. Thank you, Chair.
Because it is 13 secondaries, but then you've got your 30 primary schools. So, and I think for some schools, they will use that to identify where they need to, areas they need to develop, and any kind of behaviours they need to address, or any knowledge gaps. And then they'll put in place projects and initiatives, and they might not do the survey again for 2 years to be able to kind of use that as part of an evaluation tool. And so sometimes the schools, they'll get too much data, and if you get too much, although for us it's great, but for schools sometimes they want a couple of years in between to work on what the survey has told them, and then to come back to assess what has happened.
Thank you. Sally Cartwright.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a small point in response to the question around teenage pregnancy. So obviously it's not part of this SHU report, but I just wanted to answer that just really briefly, in that the teenage pregnancy rates in Luton have declined quite steadily for a number of years now, since 2000, I think. So there's been really good work around teenage pregnancy. During the COVID pandemic, we have seen a slight increase for one reason or another, which we've been putting some additional support into through some of the COVID money that we have.
Thank you. Did you want a follow-up question? Councillor Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Tara, for the report. Just wanted to pick up something that my fellow councillor mentioned, Councillor Keynes, about sharing this information and how organisations are working together, because there's so much, that, well, in all the reports that we've heard this evening. And so how would you share this information with the other organisations as well? Because it will impact on the work that they're doing and informing policy. So is there a way that all this information that's been captured in the survey, will be shared with the other organisations as well, to assist them in what they're doing, with the young people? That's what I wanted to find out. And my second question as well is that it's quite alarming and sad as well, as parents, that to find that the highest figures to date of secondary students reported that there are no adults they can trust, and quite rightly so, that it's a risk. So what is being done, or are there any plans to address that, about this not trusting adults, and also the highest levels of anxiety and worry in low self-esteem as well? How are these going to be addressed? Because they are quite concerning for young people. In the past, I remember there used to be motivational speakers, or going into schools. I mean, I know because of the pandemic, everything is on hold at the moment. But are there any thoughts around that? For the low self-esteem and worry, because that can also impact on other things and into gang culture. I mean, so is there any way that we're going to be addressing this? Buddies or coach or mentors in schools. I'm just thinking out loud. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
In terms of your first question, so the schools will have their own report, which is unique to them, and so they will address their concerns through that, and that will be there's lots of different initiatives that are in schools, lots of work around pastoral care. They will also ask services to support. It may be it used to be the wellbeing days, it may be small group work, it may be one-to-ones. In terms of services, what I do is I divide the survey up and I give the relevant pieces of information to the relevant service. I will meet with the services at Public Health Commission, and we will look at how we will address them. So, such as I meet with Luton Sexual Health Services. I've met with Resolutions, and I will meet with other services that we work closely with, and to share the survey, to share the findings, and to see what sort of steps that we can do to move forward with supporting young people, such as simple things as one of the things that have come out of the survey is the signposting. So I'm going to I've asked the services for just very minimal information for young people to be able to access them, and we will create one big poster which we'll ask schools to put on the websites. We'll ask schools to put with it inside toilet doors, we'll put them in leisure centres, etc. But there's lots and lots of different work, and services themselves will look at the findings, look at their service users to see if they're seeing these patterns and what they can do to support. In terms of the trusted adult, there's been a huge amount of work around trauma trauma and trauma training. So not just within schools. So when we look to supporting professionals to be trauma informed, the training we gave to schools, we also ensured that resolutions did the training and looked at such health services, youth offending services, and so we do try to ensure that any training that we put in schools around trauma, being trauma informed, we would hope that as a very basic, other professionals have done that training. Certain services will have professionals within that because of the way that they work anyway. And so we do lots of work around that. There's lots and lots of initiatives that go on in schools. There's huge. I think there's a huge amount of work, pastoral care that happens within schools. And with our mental health training, we've trained over 500 practitioners in the mental health first aid training. At one time, I think we had more trained first aiders per head than anywhere in the country. That is to enable practitioners to early prevention and intervention, look at maybe aware of the signs and the symptoms, be able to signpost, be able to offer advice on self-care, but also when to signpost to professionals. So with this new training, that will be kind of upskilling other members within services to be able to have those skills. And with our new relationship, sex and health statutory programme, there's huge amounts around emotional health and mental well-being, how young people and children can spot signs and symptoms within themselves or their peers. When it's all about signposting, reaching out for help, not just for them but for others. So there is huge amount of work. And then you have the school, the partnerships and the work with CAMS and CHUMS within schools, and the school workers. So there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes, but sometimes not everybody's aware that what is going on.
Councillor Keynes.
I'm only just going to make a sarcastic comment, actually. Carrying on what you were saying, do you blame children and teenagers not trusting adults when you see the way the government's working? It really is depressing, I think, for even me, let alone youngsters coming up. End of rant.
Difficult to disagree with that. Thank you. Any other comment? Councillor Kershid.
It's okay. Thank you, Chair. It seems a long day for you. It's quite alarming, to be honest, and quite disturbing for me, because to know that our youth is not feeling confident at all, and they've lost the trust and they lost their self-esteem. So what I'm wondering, whether is there anything we as in the councillors can play any part or any role to uplift our children. So it's just for the curiosity's sake, I just want to know whether there are any, is it feasible or not? Thank you.
Oh, is that question for me? Oh, so in terms of the councillors, I think you've got a really significant role in raising this awareness and supporting schools and voluntary organisations who do have that input with young people, and also parents and communities, because sometimes we do have some kickback from parents, and there's some different cultural attitudes around mental health and emotional well-being, and it's going into the community and supporting the messages and signposting people that there is help, there is support, there are these issues, but I think councillors can really help in empowering the community. Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the floor? Nothing, no hands up on the screen. Okay, the recommendation is that I think we acknowledge the content of the report. I think everybody's in favour of that. Yeah. Good. Thank you. So thanks for a thorough report and for responding to our questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the next item of the agenda, which is item 10, children and young people's mental health needs assessment. That's on pages 105 to 153 of your agenda pack. And that's with, who's that with? That's Elizabeth Elliott. Elizabeth, thank you, Elizabeth. Over to you, thank you.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about this needs assessment, which I, as a public health registrar working in public health, have taken on putting together over the last number of months. So I know you've all had a chance to have a look at it, and I did have a presentation, but I'm not going to go through it because all it's going to really do is go over everything that's already in there. But I just wanted to, having listened to everything that's gone on this evening, I think it's been, it's really highlighted to me a number of things that I just wanted to raise around the mental health needs assessment. I think that the main one really is around partnership working, and I think all the presentations today have all talked about how important mental health is and how we all actually really need to work as a partnership in order to address the needs of young people's mental health. We've worked really tirelessly for a number of years, and the pandemic has had such a massive impact on young people's mental health. And I think, Tara, who's really spoke really eloquently just before, and said a lot of the things that I was going to say about how young people's mental health has been significantly impacted between the last and the most recent SHU and the one before. And we've been able to see through our range of services that are commissioned just the massive increase in referrals that they've had over the last year to 18 months, and the impact of COVID has had. So it's really come at a good time, this needs assessment, because it's given us an opportunity to look at some of the data around what's happened around COVID, be able to understand a bit further so we can put in place a strategy. And that's really the purpose of this needs assessment, that it's really setting the scene for us to move forward. We've been able to, over the last few years, really transform the service. So before COVID came into place, there has been much more structured governance frameworks around how services are managed. We've changed the way that the framework around how we deliver services. So we've moved from that. Previously, we talked about tiers 1 to 4 with the lowest need going up to highest need, and we've now moved to this I Thrive model, which was it's all in the report, and it's a much more holistic approach, and it means that services can engage with young people at any stage of their needs and all stages. So that really supports our services to deliver services to young people as and when they need. So some things are working well, and I think I've identified some of them, but I can kind of go through a highlight, which was the implementation of the single point of entry into services. And that really supported our universal providers and people who refer in through social care, education, youth services, health services, who can now refer young people in at one place, and it just makes the system much more streamlined. But what we do know is that system isn't perfect, and we are continue to work to develop that service and making sure that as people come into those referrals, that they understand why, they understand coming in, what the process is, and where and when they go. And there is still a need to look at some clarity and transparency around that. So we've picked up that that's a piece of what we are working on. We've also really invested in that getting help aspect of I Thrive. So that previously was called tier 2, and that mild to moderate needs. And I think that's come up a lot. I've noticed through councillors' questions today around young people with low level anxiety, self-esteem, stress, a lot of those issues where they're not necessarily at that high need, but around that agenda of prevention, early intervention and prevention, we want to pick up and address services at that stage. So we've started doing that. There was significant investment in services doing that, but we do need more, and we are looking at finding ways of increasing the capacity of services. So looking at things like a digital offer and widening capacity for our services. And I can talk a little bit about that if people have any specific questions. We work significantly in schools, and I think I won't talk much more about schools. I think Tara really kind of, really eloquently explained what it is that goes on, and it's massive. And, we use this strapline, mental health is everybody's business. And I think that's really clear. And I think lots of things are everybody's business, but we know that within schools, the need is high, and schools are the places where young people are every day. So they have an absolutely massive role to play in this piece of work. And, there's mental health support teams that are funded by our CAMS provider, by ELFT, as well as the work that Tara does, which really means that we are really supporting schools. But again, there is always more that we can do. And we take feedback, we listen to schools and we listen to what they have to say. And we will, ensure that the training that Tara is putting in, that she talked about, had come from this piece of work, because it identified that there was a training need. We have improved our links to primary care. So GPs now, they have links into CAMS where they can just call, because they don't want necessarily to make that referral, because they know that these take a long time. So there's a hotline, they can call, speak to CAMS and just try and get an understanding, will this referral be accepted? If it is, great. If not, what we can do. And that really supports primary care. We've also increased our provision for eating disorders, because we know that's an area that has increased over the years. So we've increased it, but we can always increase it more. And there has been, especially over COVID, massive increases in referrals for eating disorders. And one more thing that I suppose I wanted to say was around improving how our co-production and how we work with service users. ELFT, our CAMS provider, has a fabulous team of young people that they work with, that they engage and they co-produce, to the extent that actually I think all their interview panels now, there's always a young person there, and they will take that young person's view on whether to hire or not when it comes to the interview process. So young people are really engaged, and we want to widen that and make sure that young people really are engaged in the process from, around all levels of service, not just that CAMS level, which is the very high level. So we can do a lot more. There are a number of recommendations. I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but what I was hoping today is obviously to answer any questions that you have, and to talk about moving these strategic recommendations forward. And we're going to do that through development of a strategy and an action plan that's being formed over the next few months. And we will happily take on board any views that you have on that. One of the main issue, or not a main issue, one of the issues that has arisen through my analysis of the data was the underrepresentation of young people from certain BAME communities. And we have been able to engage with the University of Bedfordshire to on a piece of research that's going to work with young people to try and address why that is, why are young people underrepresented in services, and to get a much better and fuller idea, and be able to actually train up some young people, both those who are in services and those who are not in services, to get a better understanding. So that's another piece of work that we're doing, as well as developing our digital offer. A range of other things going on, and really happy to answer people's questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kershid.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Elizabeth. I appreciate the amount of work you and your team is putting in order to prevent mental health issues. Despite all your efforts, so my concern is that why the Luton number has the highest. Luton has got the highest rate of mental ill health in England. So I'm quite concerned about that.
Around looked after children.
Sorry?
Was that looked after children, where it does have the highest rate in England?
Yes.
Echo.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, around looked after children.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, when I first saw that data, and this is nationally available and published data, that we do have those very high rates of emotional health and wellbeing needs amongst our looked after children. We have done a lot of work, both before I came into post and before I kind of raised this, with the looked after children's team. They have a very good team who work with young people who are looked after, who are then able to represent kind of the wider community around our looked after children. And it absolutely is something that we are working really hard to really get to the bottom of, because there is a feeling that some feedback that I had with it was almost a bit of an artifact of data, and it's because we ask the question more and we engage a lot more with our young people that maybe we're talking to them more, and that actually maybe why we're getting negative results. But I'm not, even if that is true, I don't think it's the whole answer. And I think there really is some work that we are doing, and part of this needs assessment and the strategy will work to really understand what's going on with our looked after children. And is this a real issue? Because absolutely, I think I was really horrified when we saw how high those figures are. So we absolutely do need to do something, and that's the impetus for this work, is to take this forward and address these issues.
The question is that, as you've stated in your report, that the self-harm are rising in Luton. So what I would like to know, in which ethnicity have you identified that it has been rising?
Sorry, I didn't hear. Which
means that is it in is in British Asian, Black British, or White Irish? Which ethnicity?
Which ethnicity? I think you've picked up on the question that it'd be really hard for me to give you that as an accurate answer. And I think what we need to make sure we do have good data that comes from our services. So all our services ask every young person around their ethnicity, and we've been able to pull out some ethnicity data. But what we haven't been able to do is pull it down right to that level, because it then needs to be cross-linked. So what I would say is we do know that young people are underrepresented in services. But what we don't know is kind of getting to the bottom of that. And we know there is a lot of stigma in some communities around asking for help. But we also know that some services may not be tailored culturally appropriate to the needs of some young people. And we want to get to the bottom of that. So you've picked up an important question. I can't give you an actual answer because that data just isn't collected at that level. Well, it's collected, but it's not collated and disseminated. But it is something that we are really keen to look at and address those disparities. And we know because COVID had a higher impact on certain BME groups that has led to those greater disparities across Luton.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Personally, I would love to have an answer in your next report. Thank you.
Councillor Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Elizabeth. Just wanted to pick up at the end your response there about the data needs to be collected. I think that's quite important to know the ethnicity breakdown as well. So, we'll be quite keen to hear that one. I just wanted to suggest, I don't know whether it has been already, but picking up from the report of Alan, earlier on safeguarding, about the need for all organisations to be curious and to consider how ethnicity, culture, faith and experiences of racism impact on the child and their family. So, I mean, just to thinking that, if to link up that as well, in your informing your policies going ahead on that, about the BAME communities, to look into that as well, on the culture. You just mentioned something quite interesting there as well about how mental health, the stigmatization of that as well. I mean, certainly, from my an African cultural background, that is, it's a no-no at all. That's not spoken about, by the family. Mental health is not spoken about at all. So I do agree with you, and just suggesting, to look at that, the underrepresentation of the service users. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I'm happy to respond because I think, you know, as I say, we have picked it up. We are working with the University of Bedfordshire, and I think having spoken to all our providers, they have all worked really hard over the last few years to look at that, why those referrals are lower, and you know they've gone in and spoken to community groups. They've gone in and engaged with schools and with communities and with mosques and churches to try and talk about services and address that stigma. And I think what we're trying to do now is really go in a bit deeper and actually ask the young people themselves, because I think they're the ones who are going to be able to support and tell us exactly what the problem is. So we are actually working to do that. So thank you for raising it.
Thank you. Councillor Moles.
Are you or were you involved with the young people's panel that no longer exists now? Because that was a very good, when you come to talking about self-harming, that was a very good group that would go out and talk to children that were fostered or adopted with problems and helped in a lot of cases. Do we still have a young people's organisation that does that within the council now?
So I'm happy to answer my understanding. Sorry, it's echoing again. Sorry, for my understanding. So yes, if the young people's panel was around the looked after children, there was a group, and I think it did suffer due to the pandemic, that there was, it didn't get to meet as often. And I think when it tried to reinstate it, it wasn't as well attended, but they have reinvigorated it and relaunched it. And as well as that, we also have a parents and carers forum as well. So it's we talk to kind of all levels. We talk to the young people and also their families. But actually, we do really want to engage with all those services. The youth council, any different organisation that engages with young people. So we are out there and we're engaging with all the providers and all the work that they do with young people.
Thank you. Sally Cartwright, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to going back a couple of points, apologies, just a small point on the ethnicity data element, because it is really important, but it's not all within our control. So a lot of the self-harm data, for example, is around hospital admissions. So if it's not recorded on admission into hospital by the NHS, then we can't look at the data and analyse that. So there's a lot of work happening across nationally and across BLMK around trying to improve reporting of data within the NHS services overall, and it's a key thread of some of the NHS improvement work as well. So people are aware of it at the top, but it does need a lot of work. But it's a system-wide thing around reporting ethnicity data that needs a lot of people to work on. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Nothing from the floor. I just had one question of my own, really, is in relation to the report. In chapter 7, it covers sort of the current identified gaps of provision of services, and it's got a number of subheadings where we want to be and where we are. I was just curious as to, I can't, and apologies if it's covered elsewhere in the report, but I can't see any sort of timelines as to where we want to, timelines as to how long it might take for us to get from where we are to where we want to be, and also, I guess, how we're measuring this. So how are we measuring success? Are there KPIs and so on?
So absolutely, all of our services have our provider service. Now, what I wanted to make clear, and I was talking about my presentation, which is that the Luton Council actually doesn't commission any services, or not many services around mental health. The services are generally commissioned by the CCG. So I'm not saying there isn't any, but there isn't. The majority, the ELF contract and a number of the kind of the Getting Help, those previous tier 2 providers. So from the KPI perspective and measurement, that happens between the CCG and the providers. When we're talking about timelines and delivery, this is absolutely what we're going to be putting into place. So this was really the needs assessment to say what we want and what would a good service and an ideal service look like. And now we need to look at our timelines and be realistic about what we can deliver. And it's probably going to be a 3 to 5 year process overall, but I think there are some quick wins that we can get, you know, even sooner. I don't think everything's going to take 3 to 5 years. I think a lot of it, you know, can happen much sooner, because I think a lot of the issues are around partnerships and talking to people. I think there are things we can put in place sooner. So no, you haven't missed anything. There aren't any timelines in there yet, by the very nature of the needs assessment, but what this will lead to is a strategy and an action plan with really clear and defined outcomes, KPIs and timelines.
Understood. Thank you. Don't think there are any other questions or comments from the floor. No hands up. So the recommendation is to approve the CYP mental health needs assessment together with the recommendations, and to agree for an action plan to be developed by the CYP emotional and mental wellbeing steering group. All in favour? Yeah. Yeah. Great. Councillor Curtin, yeah, sure. We can take perhaps we'll take a 5-minute break after this item. Thank you very much for that report. So we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll continue with item 11, which is item 12, which is the draft work plan. I think. Yeah. No, it is 11. We've just finished 10, yeah. So the next item is item 11. We'll take a 5-minute break before item 11. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we all have our members back now. Is everybody available on the call? Damien, what's left? Damien's there. So,
Okay. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the item 11, Children's Services Self-Evaluation. Thank you. Sorry, Damien. I've seen Damien's hands. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. So, report before you today is to introduce the current version of our self-evaluation report. As I've outlined in the cover report, every local authority is expected to produce this on an annual basis to summarise evidence of progress around the 3 key inspection judgment areas, as I've outlined in paragraph 3. Because we are currently, subject to an inadequate judgment and we're having more regular visits from Ofsted, we've taken the opportunity to update it more regularly than once a year. So it's a kind of very much an organic live document that's been constantly updated over the last 12, 15 months. Most recent version was produced just prior to the monitoring visit that took place in early December last year. Ofsted used this as a key piece of evidence to get a view from us as to where we see we are on our improvement journey, and to then test out our views on where we're at in terms of our improvement when they come to do their visits and gather their evidence and test that out through speaking to service users, speaking to practitioners to see how practice is evolving. The report, the comprehensive self-evaluation framework report is attached, and we will be planning to update it once more prior to our full ILACS inspection, which we expect to be sometime soon after Easter of this year. So I'll open the floor to questions if there are any questions from members.
Thank you. Councillor Keynes.
Hello, Damien. Won't keep you too long. Page 196, following on from what Councillor Moles was saying, you're thinking about, I've lost it. Oh yeah, transform the young people's panel format into a modern children in cares council. What does this mean, and is it going to be the same as the young people's panel?
Thanks for the question. Thanks for the question, Councillor Keynes. It's going to be slightly different. It's a proposal that has been before the executive and signed off, is my understanding. I think that's right, Amanda, is it not? It's not something I've been. Sorry.
Sorry, Damien, I was just going to come in to say, yes, that was the case, but also it had been considered at the last scrutiny panel as well.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. I haven't been directly involved with the development of that, but my understanding of it from the when it was presented at the last scrutiny group is that it will mean that there is, rather than having, it will be a meeting at which both councillors and young people are together. Young people get to contribute to that meeting on a regular basis, and and then there's much more interaction between councillors and the young people. The decision making has more teeth because it's actually incorporated into the constitution in a way that so that it's a one whole thing rather than having 2 separate forums, rather than having a young people's group and then the corporate parenting group. This Children in Care Council will give more voice to those young people, and they will have a greater, more direct influence on decision making. It's certainly the model that's used in most other local authorities. The model that we've had previously in Luton is not one that's very common in other local authorities, certainly in my experience, and I would imagine that Amanda and Paul would both echo that too. And it was based on feedback both from Ofsted and from our young people about them wanting to have a greater voice in terms of the council's broader decision making.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Can I just say that's encouraging because we've always complained that the youth panel disappeared, and they, to be quite honest with you, they were great. You listen to the kids and you learn a lot more than listening to counsellors.
Yeah, I agree, and it's as Amanda mentioned, it was something that came to committee. I'm not sure, it might have been the meeting before last actually, but yeah. So it was scrutinised. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Terry?
Only one very quick question. When's the next Ofsted visit? Do we know?
As I just, Councillor Keynes, Chair, as I just mentioned, we are expecting then our next visit to be a full ILX inspection sometime in the spring, most likely after Easter.
Thank you.
Councillor Lovell.
It's just a quick comment on page 198 about this junior safeguarding board to give children and young people who experience our service a real voice. Yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea. Yeah, it'll be good to know how that develops. But yeah, I think it's really a good idea.
Yeah. Yes, Councillor. We're currently in the process of commissioning a provider to deliver that project for us. It's certainly building on best practice from other parts of the country. It's certainly something that in Telford and Wrekin, who have been doing some work to support both members and the service, through the DFE advisor Clive Jones, the former DCS there. It's certainly an arrangement that they had in place, and certainly both Amanda and Ali on children's DMT also have experience of in Wales. It's something that originated in Wales, but it's something that is seen to be good practice, and we want to make sure that children and young people who are subject to child protection plans, child in need plans, have the opportunity to have a greater voice and to shape our services moving forward, and also to challenge us on the delivery of our statutory responsibilities too.
Can I say we look forward to that? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Damien. Any other questions or comments? No. No, and nothing for me. Thanks. Thanks for that report and for the presentation, Damien. Yeah, we accept the report, I think, broadly. Yeah. Thanks, Damien. Moving on to the next and I think final item in the agenda. So that's the looking at the forward plan, which is on page 199 to 207.
I think we've already said, Councillor Kirsch is back. This is far too long a meeting, too many reports, too long reports, which hasn't given us really a good time to discuss it properly, I don't think. But the next one is even about the same. There's 4 written reports on that. I mean, I'm just wondering how long they're going to be, and it's not being fair on the officers actually, who have to go home after a long day. It's not fair on us having to be here. So I'm just wondering whether we can try and either get another meeting in, because there's no meeting at all for February, or have a look at these reports.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a bit longer than anticipated today, I must confess. I think, so we've got the 4 reports planned for the next meeting in March, which are Children's Services Improvement Plan, Children Oral Health and Child Healthy Weight, Behaviour Wellbeing Strategy and Breakdown of Ethnicity, and Social Workers Academy. Although I think Amanda's got her hand up. I think we were actually looking at moving I think it was a Social Workers Academy to the following meeting. Amanda, I'll call you in on that.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies that I'm not going to put my camera on. It's coming up as being so dark, so I just don't want to be disruptive. I think that, as Damien's just indicated, we will be kind of absolutely focused on our planning and preparation for Ofsted. So I wonder whether, Paul, with your agreement, it would be helpful if we maintain the Social Work Academy report for the next meeting, but move the behaviour and inclusion elements to the April meeting, so that actually, from a children's social care perspective, we are focused in the April meeting on public health delivery for children's services and some of the core education delivery for children's services rather than children's social care would be my approach. And if it's helpful, Chair, then we can, because the situation has moved on since we met together with with Bert last week, that in our next touch base we can update that agenda properly now that we've had that position and indication from Ofsted. That would be my preferred approach with your agreement. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly we can discuss that in our follow-up meeting. Paul, you had your hand up, but it's down now. Did you want to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from what Amanda said, it's just to echo that. I think given that the changing development recently about the ILACS inspection coming forwards now, I think it's more about prioritisation. So absolutely more than happy to push back to the subsequent meeting the paper, the exclusions behaviour paper. So it just makes sense to have that conversation around the key themes regarding the inspection at the next meeting, Chair.
Can I ask, Chair, that Amanda and Paul talk to you before they take anything out of the agendas?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have regular meetings sort of leading up to the meetings. We'll have one. We'll have a catch up after. I think it would be as well.
Better if you saw what was being taken out and what.
Absolutely, yeah. We do agree together, sort of myself, Amanda, Bert, and certainly if you wanted to call Paul in, we could do that. Yeah. Okay, so in consideration of those sort of proposed changes to the work plan and my subsequent meetings with Amanda, we'll adjust the work plan accordingly. Any other questions or comments on that? No? Great. Okay, thank you. So there's nothing under the agenda for item 13, so I think we can close the meeting. Thanks everyone for your time and input. Thanks everybody on the line, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Stay healthy. Cheers.